Hello, people. Welcome back to another video by your good friend, Chad Marco, the Big Anarchy. Make sure you guys smash the like button and let's have a conversation. So, you guys know I put out the somewhat controversial video called Why on Pro Porn. And I guess you can kind of say this is the follow-up to that video. Because I got some people who agreed, I got some people who disagreed. Nothing really too surprising. And I'm always open for people to have a differing opinion from me. I'm cool with that. But I have to say, I started going on 4chan and getting involved in this particular debate. The pro porn guys versus the anti-porn crowd. And I gotta say, I feel like a lot of the anti-porn guys are really not logical and all that rational in their position. And so I kind of realized certain things when I was having this debate or this discussion on 4chan on different boards. And one of the first things that I noticed, because you have some people who are kind of extreme with their view on porn, and you have a lot of people who they want to have pornography like completely banned, and things of that nature. But one thing that I saw that was very common was that a lot of the people saying that were porn addicts themselves. And so that's the first problem that I have with a lot of the anti-porn crowd, is that what I notice is that it's oftentimes guys who are ashamed of their indulgence in pornography, and they lack the self-control to indulge in pornography in moderation. And so in a sense, they want to outsource the self-control to the government, basically give the government even more power and control over our lives and what we can do, because I can't control myself. And I can kind of see where you could be coming from, where you have something that you see as being like a big problem and you're like desperate to just get rid of it, find any way to get rid of it. But I think at the same time, that's unfair to the people who are able to indulge responsibly and things like that. It's kind of like somebody that might maybe you like to vape or smoke weed or something like that, and then of course you got some guys, they can't, or they would say, man, I'm addicted to smoking weed, I can't control myself, ban it. Okay, but that's not fair to the people that can smoke responsibly and smoke their weed and still show up to work on time and handle their responsibilities and things like that. So that's one of the first things that I noticed as far as like the argument against porn. But another thing I noticed too is that I think it's a very normie stance. And when I say normie, what I notice is that a lot of guys, they see it as sort of a obstacle or a deterrent from guys like going out and trying to engage and deal with real women. And you guys know how I would feel about that as someone who's embraced his virginity and doesn't mind being single and really just downright dislikes the state of modern dating. That's part of the reason why I'm all for the usage of pornography or sex alternatives, because some guys, quite frankly, just don't want to deal with all the bullshit that comes with, trying to date and impress women. And this is the thing too. Like, I see it so often where guys will go on a board like ADV, and then they might have issues with attracting women or dating, and then people would tell them to lower their standards and things like that. And not just, and you guys know the whole men want Instagram models and won't settle for average mid bitches. We all know that's bullshit. Like, what they're really telling you is you can't have a woman that's not fat, not busted, doesn't have a high body, right? But see, when you look at it from that perspective, and what I'm saying is like the same people who want to take away the alternative and the other option that you have as far as like satisfying your sexual desires and having some sort of sexual entertainment, they'll want to take that away from you. But then if you had to actually engage with real life dating, they're also going to tell you, you can't have the girl that you want. You can't have an attractive woman. You can't have a woman that's not fat. You can't have a woman that doesn't have a high body count. You can't have a woman, right? Like they're going to tell you all these things that you can't have and that you should just settle for garbage tier women at the same time. So that's another reason why it's a very normie stance, because I think that it's rooted in this idea that the only acceptable way to indulge in or to satisfy your sexual desires is with another person. And look, if that's how you feel, that's how you feel. But I think that is a very much a undeniable normie ass stance, and that's just not something that I can even relate to. I'm way far gone from that line of thinking. But I gotta say too, one of the craziest things, like one of the debates that I had, because one thing I noticed that I don't really understand about people who are anti-porn, and look, I'm not saying this like there aren't negatives that you can attribute to porn use, you know, because again, I've been down the rabbit hole and then some, right? And you know, just for myself, I can say that, you know, one of the bad things about my use of pornography was that, you know, a lot of times I found myself just overindulging and spending too much time masturbating, you know, like looking for that perfect video, trying to curate my collection, right? Organizing my porn collection and edging and things like that. You know, there were plenty of times where, like, and even worse, times where I might have been kind of bummed out or even depressed, and then you start looking for some sort of escape. And then oftentimes I would turn to pornography, you know, and I know that when I am indulging in pornography for the express purpose of that sort of like escapism, that's not healthy, you know. But at the same time, when I just indulge in it for fun to enjoy myself, I don't really have an issue with it. But again, I know, and then on top of that, you got the, you know, the porn industry in of itself can be so seedy, and you know, it can exploit the performers. And then you have some guys who, again, they overindulge in things. Like, so I'm not saying like there's no issue with it. And then sometimes with relationships too, where it can cause issues between men and women. Oh, the woman wants the man to quit the porn. So I get it. But what I don't understand is how someone can have the amount of heat towards pornography and not have the same issue with other vices that are legal or acceptable, but much more dangerous. Like, and alcohol is the one that comes to mind for me, you know? And so look, if you are just anti-porn, anti-vice, period, I might not agree, but at least that's a consistent morality there. Because for me, it doesn't make sense to want a lesser vice ban as opposed to vices that are much more harmful. Because like there is nothing you can attribute or attach to pornography that even comes close to the damage that alcohol causes on humanity on a yearly basis. Like I forgot the exact number, but I think like there are, I think over like 100,000 alcohol related deaths in the United States a year alone. Now, I could be off with that, but there are a lot of people that die as a direct result of alcohol consumption. Then you have, you know, alcohol addiction, people having to go to like Alcoholics Anonymous, different health problems, you know, issues with the, I think alcohol negatively affects the liver, right? Then you have like just the more minor things. Oh, a minor car accident here, or a situation where a girl got too drunk and maybe she got sexually assaulted. A guy got drunk and did something stupid. Oh my God, I shot my dad while I was drunk. Now I'm going like on every level, alcohol is worse, but I don't see nearly as many people calling for the complete banning of alcohol compared to pornography. Again, it's not logical. It doesn't make logical sense. Now, if you're going to say, look, I'm completely anti-vice. No cigarettes, no alcohol, no porn, no video games, no fun. Right? Look, I might not agree, but I can at least say, well, look, you're morally consistent. I can at least appreciate that. But it just bothers me, or like when people try to be so anti-porn to the point they want to see it banned, but then they don't have that same energy for cigarettes and vapes and alcohol and things like that. It just, to me, just absolutely does not make sense. Another thing I noticed too, this was interesting, because I had this discussion on GIF, H, R9K, and Pole specifically. Now, what I noticed is that, now what's interesting is that on GIF, so if we had to break it down to who was anti-porn versus who was pro-porn, the interesting thing about it, despite GIF being like primarily a porn board, I would say it was like roughly 30 to 35% pro-porn, 70 to 65% anti-porn. Most of the crowd that were anti-porn seemed to be porn addicts, right? But on H, which is the hentai board, it was like the exact opposite. It was like probably 75% pro-porn, 25% anti, and then even the anti were more like lukewarm, kind of middle-ish, right? R9K, I noticed, is kind of like 50-50, 40-60, either way, something like that. Pole is like, as you would expect, like I would say 85-90 against. But what was fascinating to me about that was that H was the most pro-porn. And I can only speculate. But I think it's because one, when you're talking about hentai, or when you're talking about pornography that is like drawn or created digitally using computers, it doesn't require real people to be involved. So there isn't like the same sort of exploit, like the same aspect of women or men being exploited. There isn't the same aspect of like the porn industry and culture of drug use and depression and abuse, and she was molested and then she turned into a porn star. That, like, it's not like those elements are completely missing, because when it comes to hentai, comics, doujins, anime, whatever, you're talking about a bunch of guys, sometimes women, just drawing and creating these things. So it's more of like an artistic thing as opposed to like someone having to perform and things like this. So I think maybe because of that, people feel less shame about it. But I also speculate that it's possible because you look at my frame of mind, and part of the reason why I think I'm so pro porn and why I'm fine with it is because, I just completely embrace pornography as an alternative or just another way to satisfy your sexual urges. I don't have that same normie mentality that I have to prove myself or my manhood by fucking bitches. And I think that when people get really into hentai or 2D porn and things like that, it does kind of imply a level of like nerding out outside of the norm. I think and again, I'm just speculating, but if a normie out of nowhere says, I want to get into porn, they're probably going to start with like real life porn, 3D porn. They're going to go straight to Pornhub or something, like, looking at the favorite or the top porn stars, typical shit. But more weirdo strange, virginal, autistic perhaps type people are gonna go even deeper down the rabbit hole towards. I think it's kind of like how anime used to be like a nerdy thing, right? And I think in a way porn kind of works the same way, where like the more nerdy you are about porn, you're probably gonna start, that's when you start getting into hentai. And once you start going to that extreme, you're probably someone that really embraces pornography as a means to satisfy your sexual urges, as opposed to someone who's just using it habitually and reluctantly when they really want to have a girlfriend, when they really want to get married and have kids like that. But again, that's just my own personal theory. But, you know, again, man, I don't really see like just strong, sturdy logic against pornography without being someone who's just strictly anti-vice, period. You know, and that's not really my stance. You know, my whole stance on vices is more about just, you know, achieving balance and indulging in moderation, whatever it might be, whether it's pornography, alcohol, marijuana, vaping, video games. Like, I'll give you the perfect example, right? Like, I don't drink alcohol. I don't drink alcohol at all because I recognize all of the negative side effects and potential harm that could cause to me and others. But I don't look at that and say, well, let's ban alcohol, because there are a lot of people who can indulge in it, have their fun, and then they don't hurt themselves, they don't hurt other people. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who do. That's part of the reason why we had prohibition all those years ago. You know, and then like I look at my mom. My mom, she drinks alcohol. But she is like the shining example of responsible alcohol consumption. Like right there in our living room, she got like a nice little alcohol bottle rack. She got all her bottles lined up, stuff that she got from like other countries and shit like that. And stuff that she bought or ordered. And like really, I rarely see my mom drink. And she always tells me like she's a social drinker. She likes to drink with like whenever she hang out with her girlfriends, or, you know, she'll have like her wine night or her night off. But she's like the shining example of someone that can indulge alcohol responsibly. My dad, I believe my dad was an alcoholic, right? So like when you look at like me and my family, my dad, alcoholic. My mom drinks responsibly. Me, I don't drink at all. So you kind of see like all of the like you see the extremes, from overindulgence to moderation to just absolute abstinence on my end. But again, like I don't see that and say, well, let's ban it. You know, like that's because, and then just on vices themselves, God, I think, you know, I'll kind of close it out with this point. I think that we as human beings, to put it simply, we like to enjoy ourselves. We like to have fun. And I think that's why vices have always kind of followed us throughout history. And different people have different vices. And I think what it comes down to is, like I said, we want to have fun. We want to enjoy ourselves. Everything about life is not about just being strictly productive and focused and always trying to move the needle, so to speak, or make those numbers go up. Sometimes people just want to relax and turn up, have some fun. And I think that for me, I see sex as a vice the same way I see food as potentially being a vice. Alcohol, drugs, video games, entertainment, movie, like I see all these as vices to one extent or another. And I can't imagine being so adamant against pornography or sex as a vice, specifically compared to everything else. Because I think when you look at it, pretty much most vices, when you overindulge, when you take it too far, it can be harmful to yourself. It can be harmful to others. But at the same time, I don't think many of us want to live in a world where we don't have any vices, where we don't have something, whether it's a drink, a smoke, a video game, some anime, some pornography, the strip club, whatever it may be, you know. But my whole thing has always been, you know, just whatever your vice happens to be, just indulge in moderation the best that you can. And if you can't, sometimes personally you have to make a decision to stay away from it completely. Everybody doesn't have the self-control. Some people can drink responsibly, some people have to stay away completely. And then I think, when it comes down to that, it's about you knowing who you are and what you can handle. Like for me, I don't even risk certain things. Like I don't fuck around with alcohol because I don't right. That's part, like I don't even play with that shit because I don't trust myself to indulge in that responsibly or in moderation the way that I should. So I don't even fuck. So again, it's about knowing yourself and what you want your vices to be and how much you should indulge. But that's the video. That's my thoughts on that. I would love to get you guys feedback, your opinions, and your hateful comments. So I will see you guys later. Johnny.